Lindsay, I especially like Imagine's peer support model of children working in age-appropriate groups and parents working together at the same time with trained group leaders providing guidance. How do children and adults cope with their grief differently?
I think there's a few things on this. We say there is, I think, a myth that children, they're resilient, they will all be fine, because they were children. But the idea that, and I'm not going to remember who said it, but if you're old enough to love, you're old enough to grieve.
Yeah.
And we start as young as 3 years old. And part of the unique thing for me over these past few years has been watching children grieve. And I think we know it at Imagine, but it's less common knowledge that grief goes on for so much longer than people think.
Yeah.
And I think everyone regrieves, and especially children. And children grieve in bursts, but so do adults. Yeah. They grieve in bursts. I think adults have maybe a bit more of a skill to compartmentalize their grief. They might be able to make intentional, and they have more life behind them. But I can't say that because adults have more life behind them, they're better at it, or that they have more perspective. They don't. The way our grief maybe shows up at times can feel different, right? A child can play 1 minute, cry 1 minute, and then go right back out with their friends another minute later. But I've seen adults who can do those same things. Yeah. And so I don't know that they're that different, but I think there are commonalities that are worth stamping. And regrieving at significant milestones it's just the truth about grief.
Yeah.
My daughter was 4 weeks old when her father died. She's just turned 8. So we're on our 8th anniversary this weekend of my husband's passing. And she wrote in her journal for the first time this week. Oh. I never, ever would have thought that she would have been a child who journaled. And all of these coping skills that we know about, expose people to, the regular exposure, and the idea that something that worked for you at one time might not work later, and something that you never tried could work later in life. And I love that about being there for the longevity of grief. The thing I thought grief would be this short-term experience.
Right.
And in my history and in the history of those that I meet at Imagine, I will say very few of us think, oh, I'm done with that.
Right.
My grief journey's over.
Right.
I like to say, if he were still alive, I'd still love him, and he's still gone, so I still grieve him. And my grief might look different as time moves on, but it's still there.
Yep. I think that awareness building is almost the special ingredient for these kinds of support groups that you guys are running. Is the fact that you don't have to fear grief, is that you can own it and you can hug it, and it changes over time, but it's yours. And to me, instead of the idea of suppressing it or repressing it or pushing it away, or it's going to have to be over or something's wrong, is really what makes these support groups so special, is that you get to own it in your own way. So.
And I think our relationship with our grief changes. I am very conscious of the fact that I'm 8 years out.
Yeah.
So when I think about my own grief and, think about leading the organization, I have to constantly balance that. The way I feel about my grief now is very different than many of the families that are walking through the door.
Right.
That grief at the time, I don't want to feel it. I wish I didn't have to have it. I don't feel grateful for it maybe at this time. I feel angry that I have to be the one that's grieving. And if someone told me, at that time, oh, you won't always feel this way, that would feel really dismissive of my journey.
Yes.
And so the idea that at every stage, the best thing we can do is validate the way in which the person is feeling. And whether they're 3 years old and they're missing their father and they're angry that, my daughter says, Cameron got 4 years, I only got 4 weeks. While that might hurt my feelings, it is her experience, and validating our children's experiences and separating out, this is the hardest one. God, I am constantly practicing this. Our grief, we talk about ripples of grief and secondary grief that we all have, but your grief journey bumps into the grief journey of all the people around you.
Yes.
They're grieving too.
Yes.
And so who's ripple and who gets the grief spotlight right now? And, that is so complicated. So option B, Sheryl Sandberg writes about, who's in the inside of the circle, and that we support in and we dump out. And I love that. And always identifying, like, who am I supporting and who can I share my grief with? Mm-hmm. Those highly metacognitive, just to put more pressure on people who are grieving. Also, think about it's so complicated.
Though it is. But what your program does, and you're not only talking the talk, but you walk the walk, is that you can talk about it. You're here right now talking about it, and this is what your program does, is gives everyone the opportunity, the ability. Maybe that's when we always talk about resilience, but maybe that's what resilience really is. Resilience is to be able to face your worst pain and fears and be able to talk about them. That is incredibly difficult to do. And you've given that gift to your 8-year-old daughter and your son. That's magnificent. And I think the duration of intense grief spikes is lessened, lengthwise at least, maybe not emotion-wise. That intensity, I think, is lessened by having that opportunity to mourn the way that you're talking. Yeah,
having the both permission. I think when I was talking with a young person at Imagine recently, and she said, the first few weeks I really wasn't sold, but each time I came, I said nothing, but I heard other people share.
Right.
And what it did was it gave me permission privately to feel what I was feeling, because I heard someone else was feeling that way too.
Yeah.
And remembering, that's the teacher in me, I want to check if kids, more is caught than taught, right? Like, they see what is happening around them, and the power at Imagine, and both in all these spaces that I know we're trying to create, our children get to see others, and they get to see their adults. And we use the word adults, not always parents, their caregivers also getting grief support. Mm-hmm. And people will say as they leave Imagine that the best time with their children on the drives home from Imagine, because they both got the support they needed, and now they're ready to tell each other about it. And that it's like, it's through osmosis that they know that there is this supportive culture where people are grieving and people are talking about it. And now I go to my safe person and I tell them more about it.
Yeah. Oh boy, that makes me feel good. I'm glad that's happening. Excuse me. I know you have locations in Newark and Mountainside. I know you serve over 600 participants in 87 towns every other week. This is
constantly
phenomenal.
Changing. Yes. Yes. Is that where we are right now? Yeah.
So I think you have a lot of experience in the circumstances of losses, race, and socioeconomic factors. And I believe they have an effect on grief and mourning. One, do you see that? Is my observation correct? And two, how does Imagine adapt to these factors?
Yeah. Opening in Newark has been like a dream come true for the organization. I think the opportunity to serve children and adults coping with loss, and it happens personally for me to be in the city that I started my career.
Yeah.
But I often say that the city of Newark actually taught me to grieve, So this idea that like we are now serving Newark, people have been serving Newark in churches and communities all over.
Yes.
So when we originally opened in the city of Newark, we spent our time asking, like, do you want us to come? Do you want
Right.
their services here?
Right,
Because
right.
you have wonderful organizations doing great things. And we realize that there is enough grief, not just in Newark, but all across New Jersey. There's enough grief to go around. And we need more sacred, special spaces. And I think one of the unique things, we love Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. She uses something called the intersectionality, an intersectional lens on grief, where we talk about the idea that there are so many aspects of our who we are as humans that it is highly unlikely that any two people will grieve the same. So we could be the same race, the same religion, the same age, lost the same person, and our grief journeys will still be different, you know? And as much as possible, what people are looking for are people who have stories that are somewhat similar to them.
Right.
You know, and so trying to have peer-to-peer support groups. So we do the best that we can always and listen to the people we serve at all of our centers. So you might remember this from Imagine's early days. You know, we started as a very child-focused bereavement organization, and we've grown in realizing that our children are with their caregivers very frequently, and their caregivers' grief impacts the children. And so now our adult programming is more robust probably than we ever imagined it could be. That is really important. And it used to be adults in mixed loss groups. So you could have any relationship to the person who died. But our participants said child loss feels very different than life partner loss.
Right.
And so now people who've experienced the death of children are in a group, which is separate from people who experience the death of a life partner.
Right.
That's one deviation we made. Then we started looking at the causes of death at our center. And we realized that people are self-disclosing suicide death, 10% of the people who come to Imagine, of the adults. And what we realized was the stigma, right? The disenfranchised grief is the term that's coined for it. Grief that you don't get to openly share because you fear judgment. And that can impact your grief journey. And I realized it when Imagine offered its first Widows Retreat. There was a woman who, you know, we all share our name and who died and how they died. And the next day she came forward and she said, I just want to tell you all that I lied last night. You know, my husband took his own life. And I'm sorry I didn't trust you all. And in the group, 3 other women said, me too.
Wow.
And what it showed me was, wow, there is this burden that they are carrying that I never had to carry. You know, the fear that like there will be judgment on me as a result. And so now Imagine offers a suicide bereavement group. So no matter where we go, we will listen to the family experience and continue to do everything we can to honor the experiences of people who are grieving and do what it is that they are asking of us as an organization.
Oh,
I don't know.
very impressive.
That's what we're trying.
Thank you. That's so good. A little bit of a shift here, sort of before someone dies. I believe that talking about end-of-life issues with children is healthy for both the dying family member and the children. In your perspective, when, if possible, do you think end-of-life issues should be addressed with the children?
I think they say that children can handle anything as long as it is told in age-appropriate ways from someone who loves and cares for them. And, you know, we have a skill at Imagine that I love, and it's called like playing out the movie. Okay, so it's this idea that like, let's think about a decision we're trying to make and decide, okay, how will this play itself out? What will it look like a week later or 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later? And so children will ask for information, and realizing that as developmentally appropriate as possible, we share information with them when they ask for it, right? And all of those challenging topics that we talk about with kids, you know, end of life, sex, drugs, alcohol, mental health. Our kids are curious and they want to know things. Imagine staff is there to answer the phone and to help each family through these questions. We get questions of, you know, so-and-so has just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Do I tell my children today? Right? And Imagine doesn't have the right answer. All we can do is help you think through, what would it sound like for you to do that? What if you didn't do it? What might happen? And which one feels right for you and your family.
Yeah.
So while I'm always a proponent of honest, open conversations with children, there are so many factors at play in all of those, and the family knows the child best. So we try to hold families' hands through what is right at each time and how can you do it as openly and honestly as possible.
I love that. The social workers and maybe psychoanalysts a little bit have this idea of following the contact. So listen, ask an appropriate, curious question, and then find where that family's at, and then guide them a little bit.
Right.
They'll know the right thing to do.
Right.
But I think what I heard you say is children are never too young to be made part of the process. They should be engaged in that process.
I believe that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really scary. I remember trying to find the words to say to my 4-year-old, and thankfully, like, using our resources.
Yeah.
One of the things Imagine did teach was concrete terms, that using the words dead and died or dying, or things as concrete as what it means when someone dies is their heart has stopped and their brain has stopped and they can't feel pain anymore.
Right.
And I remember saying to my son, like, that means that we're going to take Daddy's body and we're going to put it in the ground, and that's called burying. Those are words that I never, ever imagined would have to come out of my mouth.
Yeah.
But it created clarity for him, and it's almost like informed consent. It's helping him understand what he's going to see, what's going to happen, and that can take fear away that we don't even realize might exist for them because they understand what's about to occur.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. I'm reminded of a story of a young boy who was not told about death and what happens to his family member's body. But he saw I think it was his dad, in a casket. But his assumption was he had some part of him was still alive. So after they closed the casket, the next day the boy was having terrible, terrible nightmares. And someone asked him what it was about. He said he was so afraid that his dad was in the casket and he was pooping, and and that he was lying in his poop. They never told him that your body stopped. So what that means, and I think just that little bit of clarity for him was so helpful. I mean, he was having,
not only children, right? For any of us who have been along the end of life journey, with an adult or someone we love, as concretely as possible, knowing the sound that the machine makes and the sound of breathing, or the signs that you'll be looking for to tell you the end is near. We use a lot of euphemisms. The end is near, right? Like, his heart will stop beating and you'll know it by, and listen, 8 years of practice on my end to be able to say words like this. So I just want to say there is no judgment for anyone.
No.
And I also have to realize in the bereavement field that while these words are becoming more natural for me to say out loud, they are not natural for most people.
No. That's why we're doing this today.
And I actually had a school nurse stop me and say, you've done such a good job trying to make this normal for your children. And her next sentence hurt me really badly. She said, but it's not normal.
Yeah, I know.
And I mean, that cut like a knife, And I think what she was trying to remind me is, like, as much as you are doing everything you can, it is still hard on your children.
Yes.
And I think it is what we will do together as a community to try to normalize. It's never going to take the pain away. Because if we were to take the pain away, we're taking away their opportunity to grieve.
Yeah.
So that's not our concern. But our goal is to prevent any additional trauma as a result of not knowing
Correct.
things, So language, concrete language for children and for adults, like getting to be alongside someone as they're taking their last breaths is very challenging. And sometimes for people, they can be really glad they were there.
Yeah.
I don't want to assume that for most of us, or that every relationship was a loving one, or that every death is an easy one. They're not all.
It'd be a lot easier if it was all the same.
Right. They're not. Everyone is so different.
I know. It makes the thing so challenging.
But I do think that most people who have gone through an experience like this want to talk to other people. I remember that there was a motion that I couldn't get out of my head. I was responsible for administering pain medication. And sitting in a bereavement group, I did this motion and someone else did this motion. And, they say muscle memory, that your body remembers these very integral things. And that's true for children too. They have these things that they don't even, so this, but I'd imagine we have a hospital room.
Yeah.
It is a room that children get to play in. Yeah. They never have to, but if they want to, they get to play in it because there are other children who have spent time in spaces like this. And just like in a peer-to-peer support group, the adults want to talk about it, the kids play through it.
Yeah.
And they are playing with someone who has been in this space too.
Yes.
Sorry, I stole a question you had.
You led right into it. It's perfect. I was just like, yeah.
It's somewhere.
So I'll ask the question now. So in my therapy practice, it's best that patients not act on their feelings, but talk them out. Understand what they're about. Understand their thoughts and emotions. This leads to patients generally making better decisions for themselves. But the children need more than talk and grief support, such as play, drama acting, painting, and rituals.
Yeah, without a doubt. The rituals are so incredibly important. And I think the idea that offering rituals that are repetitive, we think we need to come up with this like massive list of things that kids can do.
Right.
But just the exposure to the same thing regularly so that they can access it at different places and different points, right? In your therapy sessions, you're not coming up with a whole new, right? Usually it's, how are you today? And that opens the whole thing.
Right.
The ritual of coming,
the
ritual of knowing that this is a sacred space for you and that everyone here has also. And then, our kids play with each other. Yeah. It is the only space in their lives, well, they will be in a room where every other child has had someone significant in their life die.
Yeah.
Just that alone removes this burden, and children believe they're the only one this happened to. It was their fault. Well, is it all of our faults, right? And why I love our peer-to-peer support is, these age bands. We have 6 to 9-year-olds, and there's no time limit on how long you have to come or how long you get to come. So we have a 9-year-old who's been coming since she was 4, right? 5 years. Boy, is she the most effective leader of that group, right? When a 6-year-old is saying, it's my fault because I didn't call 911 fast enough. Yeah. She says, like, I was 4 and I couldn't call 911 either, right? No amount of adult telling you, honey, it wasn't your fault will ever make up for the experience of having a 9-year-old saying me too.
Yeah.
Right? The opportunities for kids to have lots of different ways that they engage with their grief. Our middle schoolers, one of their favorite activities is the playlist of their lives, right? All the songs you listen to when you want to cry, songs you listen to that cheer you up, songs that you remember that they used to sing, songs that they played in their car. And all these little entry points, kids will find ways that they connect with each other and they get to connect and keep the bond with the person who died if they want to.
Yeah.
So it's not, how are you feeling today with our kids? Because they will never tell you that. But when you give them all these activities, and they don't have to be, that many, but these activities, these entry points for grief and opportunities, like we do an event at the Somerset Patriots. Why? What teenager do you know that wants to come to a bereavement center?
Right.
But when they meet Imagine or other people who've gone with dealing with loss out in the community, that bond is there. And that makes coming to a place like Imagine a little less scary. We do a butterfly release in the cemetery. That one is, people who want to get into the cemetery, but all of those or we do Greta's Run, a 5K and a memory walk, and people get to enter the grief process at all these little toes in the water, will open a lot of like floodgates for people.
I love that combination of action in the honor of talking and thinking and feeling. So kids can play together, and then when the moment hits them, they can talk and they talk to each other. I think it's a great combination. Great combination. Well, I think our audience learned a lot about children in grief today. Thank you.
Thanks.